Welcome back into Exit 99 Sports. As always, my name is Caleb DeLoach, and today, joined by a very special guest, Coach Stephen Hemby over at Cape Central. Coaches track, football, a little bit of everything. Coach, you've been now over here at Cape Central for a few years, and I'm glad to have you on the show.
I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to talk about, Cape Central and our kids and all the things that we've done and, what we're hoping to continue to do.
Yeah, and you guys are coming off a great year and across a lot of different sports. We just finished track and field, had great finishes, both teams in the top 10 at the state meet there in Class 4. So really, really good accomplishment. I'm just just briefly start there at the end. Heck of a year for your kids, just all-time type stuff we were talking about before we started.
Yeah, it was a great year for us, going to the state meet. We thought we could be competitive and do some things both on the boys and girls side, and both those teams showed up and gave it their best shot over the chaos of the weekend. It would have been very easy for our kids to just kind of fold up and let the elements get the best of them, but they didn't. Mm-hmm. They came back Saturday and they performed, and that's what we asked them to do. Yeah,
it was a really, really fun track season watching your kids all year. We'll jump into that in a little bit. Start with a little bit about you, Coach, so people get to know a little bit more about you. I know you're a graduate of Montgomery County. For those that don't even know where Montgomery County High School is, Coach, where's that at geographically from here?
Right between Wentzville and Columbia off I-70. It's about 7 miles off the highway. The high school sits in a cornfield essentially, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but it definitely helped, raise me. I was raised by a single mom up there, and that's kind of where I got into my coaching. Where I wanted to become a coach was the coaches that I had at Montgomery County. Right. You and I were talking about stories with Coach Eckley. I played for Coach Eckley, who obviously is at Jackson, now at Farmington, and my offensive line coach is a guy that I call him my dad. Mm-hmm. It's essentially my dad. Just passed away this past, I think it was October. Passed away in October, but, he was my offensive line coach, which I spent, I can't even count the hours I spent with him there. And then I turned around and he was my head track coach and my throwing coach. Okay. So, I spent pretty much my four years of high school with him. And I was blessed with great coaches, like I said, but he's really kind of the mentor that got me into going, hey, I want to do what you're doing. I want to do what you do and give back and coach and do those things. And I've been able to do that. And that's one of the things that that I'm proud of. From where I've come from and what I've done. And I think Coach Blank would agree. He's proud of what I've done and what I will continue to do. And I told our kids before when he passed away and all that stuff, like, there's not a drill, there's not anything that we've done that he hasn't impacted you. And, it's important that, that I got to mention him and talk about him for a minute, because I wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't because of him.
Yeah, exactly. Coaches, you have influences from before, you became a coach. It is those coaches that you got to live through. And
for
like
sure.
you said, those are the most impactful people in a lot of young guys' lives. You have your parents at home, whoever that might be, grandma, grandpa, things like that. But at the end of the day, if you're an athlete, you're spending more time with your coaches usually than you are at your own house.
For sure. That's exactly my story, and I'm just glad that I've been put in a position to be able to give back like my coaches did for me. And that's the thing that I would say why I got into coaching, that I'm to that point now where, yes, it's it's great to coach kids to their successes on the track, on the football field, and all that stuff. But I really enjoy getting the invitations to weddings, the baby announcements, that kind of stuff, because obviously that shows that I made an impact in those kids' lives, for them to want me to know about the key points in their life, right. And that's what it's about for me. That's that's the thing that I will continue to always appreciate, is the relationships that I get to build with my kids, because that's what will ultimately help me change lives going forward. And that's what I like.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to win on Friday night. It's great to have a kid run well at a track meet, put on a show, all that good stuff. But it's the life things that really kind of lure me back into, okay, hey, this is the real life part of it, and what I'm blessed to do. That's what I like.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned there briefly something a lot of people around here can relate to or be interested in. You played for Coach Eckley.
I did.
At Montgomery County. You got young Coach Eckley up there at Montgomery County.
I did.
And then even after surviving that, you decided to go and coach for him for a few years at Union as well. What was that experience like? You can share whatever you want there as far as playing for Coach Eckley, but then also that transition of immediately, becoming a co-worker, if you will, of that same guy.
Playing for Coach Eckley, we learned a lot. It would be tough not to learn football from the guy. If you didn't learn football from him, you weren't trying. And we were successful at Montgomery County, won a lot of games. And then, I went off and played Division III football for about 2 weeks before I got hurt. And when I came back and had surgery, I heard from my coaches. I helped out Montgomery County. They went to the state title game the year after my senior year. And I helped them while I was hurt, break down film and do stuff like that. So it kind of started my coaching career. Mm-hmm. But, as I'm sitting on the couch, I get a phone call from Coach Eckley that said, basically, hey, I got a position open at Union. I'll get you back into school. He helped me get into the East Central Community College there, and wanted me to help coach. So, I got back into school down there. Me and my best friend moved in to an apartment down there at Union and took some classes and, coached football there with him for a year or two. And then in that time, my family moved to Southeast Missouri. So after my time there at Union was done, I moved down here to Southeast Missouri with my family, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah. So after, moving down here, you were at Jackson for Coach Eckley's first season here.
Yeah.
I'm sure. What was that like? Maybe, kind of a new place, big school in this case, kind of coming somewhere new with him.
It was eye-opening for me. I've only been, even Union, which was Class 4 at the time, it didn't seem like a big town, didn't seem like a big school. Yeah. So I was actually driving back and forth to Montgomery County on Mondays and Fridays to help them. And then when Coach Eckley got the job, I got a text message, hey, would you be interested in helping over here? And immediately it's like, yeah, I would be glad to. It was different. It was a change. You go from, like I said, 80 kids in the high school to whatever Jackson had, 1,500 or whatever they were that year that I was there. A lot more changes on the football field. I've never had to split practice. We never had to have JV and varsity on different sides. We never had to do that. So it was a learning experience for me, and ultimately one that I really enjoyed. And I really just kind of think I enjoyed the Southeast Missouri aspect of it. Yeah. It was special. It got me to where I needed to go. And from there, I was blessed to get hired down at Scott City with Coach May. Mm-hmm. One of those things that, it worked out, just the way it needed to work out. Yeah. And, I spent 6 good years down there coaching football, track. I coached girls basketball for a couple years. It was a great experience for me. That just kind of helped me tie my roots here in Southeast Missouri, and, got married. During that time, met my wife, who's a Cape grad, and, we got stepson who's a Cape grad, and then my daughter will be a 7th grader going into this next year here at Cape. So, those roots are planted down here, and, we've been blessed, and I've been blessed for sure. And, I love the area, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. And I mean, heck of a resume of guys that you've now worked under at this point. You mentioned Eckley, Coach May at Scott City. He's now in the conference, Sykeston, and now, you come to Cape the same year Coach Gibbs did. I mean, that's multiple Hall of Famers you've worked under.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're obviously all of them different, but how important or impactful has that been? Just kind of learning how to coach from a lot of different legends of the area, really.
Yeah. It's definitely helped impact me as a coach. As you said, they all have their strengths that they help me learn from. Coach Gibbs is one of those ones that, it's hard for me to describe Coach Gibbs because he's just been such a great mentor to me in my coaching journey. We talk about this a lot, but I started calling defense my first 2 years when I was at Cape. I'd call defense at Scott City when I got hired. They needed a defensive coordinator. I stepped in. We won some games, but I'll be honest, I was not very good. I was not a very good defensive coordinator. And the thing with Coach Gibbs is, I think he obviously recognized that. Now, we were blessed to get Coach McGill up from Sykeston for those couple years, and he stepped in and helped us, really kind of take the next step defensively and do some things. But it got me to get back to offensive line where I was with Coach Sink, who is another great mentor of mine that, I was blessed to have him for those couple years that him and I got to work together. But that's really where I'm comfortable. That's where I feel that's where I feel the most at home, coaching the offensive line and, being able to get with Coach Gibbs, who could, I could have a conversation with him about how I felt, and he took the time to not only build me up as a coach, but also like, hey, wait your turn. It'll show up, and, I can't remember if this is my fourth year now. I think it's my fourth year coaching offensive line at Cape, or maybe even my fifth. But it's been really good, and it's one of those things that it's tough for me to see myself being anywhere else. Like right. It's I owe a lot to Coach Gibbs and getting me to Cape and doing the things that he did to help me out. And I'm blessed to be in the position that I am, coaching the offensive line, and obviously with the track part of it now, Cape's been really good to me, and I'm trying to give back in as many ways as I can. But it's been great.
Yeah,
been great.
And then also you work over at the Central Academy.
I do.
Okay.
Yep. Which is another great place. And I told you when you talked about my first stop at Jackson was how big it was, and and I still would struggle with that a little bit, to be honest with you. But being at the academy, it's a small school in a big school district.
Right.
So like I get the small school feel, and then I just get to go coach big school football.
It's a good combo.
Yeah, absolutely, which has been good. I mean, it helps me, and the whole way the academy works and the alternative school and all of that. Like, I just get to build relationships with kids, and that's what I think I do well, and that they have allowed me to do well. And it's just one of those things that I'm blessed in many ways, and that's one of them. Being at Central Academy and being able to impact kids over there has been great, and then obviously going into the sports aspect of it as well has been really good for me.
Yeah, so talking about track a little bit now, where we just into the season now a few weeks ago for you and I here in real time. When did you get involved in track here at Cape Central?
So I coached baseball my first year at Cape, so it would have been 19 and 20, so COVID year. So I coached baseball for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, that was a really easy season to coach.
Yeah, I mean, we had our orange and black game, and that was literally the only game that I coached in. And then COVID happened, and we got through that. We go to football season. I finished football season, and there was an assistant that was on the staff that he actually worked at the academy with us, but he moved in December. His family moved out to Oregon. And Coach Crowden was on the staff, knew I wanted to be part of the track staff. So he reached out. I obviously reached out to Coach Sheridan, had some conversations. So in December, I actually switched from baseball to track going in there. So that would have been 2021 track season, I guess. So that's kind of where I started. And you can obviously look at me and tell I'm a throws guy. It's where I've been. But we've got a good throwers coach at Cape that's been there a long time. He's obviously doing good things with our throwers. We'll talk about some of those kids later. So I had to adjust. Right. Well, what do I really know? Well, can I relate shot put to sprinting? I don't know. So I did jumps those first couple of years. And that first year was probably a little rough. I had some talent with some kids that ultimately, like, their senior year really got better. And then I've bounced between sprints and jumps depending on what we need as a staff. Because I've built that ability to be flexible enough that we can get the best coach on staff, and if I have to move to a different spot, I can do it.
Right.
So I bounced between sprints and jumps for the last 3 or 4 years. Finished with sprints this year. But, it's one of those things that it really kind of helped open me up to being a better coach, and ultimately, my goal is to be a head track coach at some point. Well, you got to know more than just your specialized event would be the way I would call it. So, that's been really good for me is getting in and learning some things. I always laugh with Coach Sheridan and his son Kent, who's the state champion pole vaulter. I was like, Kent, it's just one of those things that you're going to have to coach me. You're going to have to teach me because they don't make stainless steel poles to get me up over that bar, buddy. So, that's just something that, I can learn it, but I'm never going to be able to teach it because they're never going to find a pole big enough for me to get over a bar.
Yeah, and like you said, you guys have had a lot of success in the time you've been there. You guys have had a lot of great individual athletes, and looking at this past season, all the successes. You mentioned Kent won a state title, Taraji Riley won a state title, but last year, there was success building off of last season for you guys. You had Kent went to the state meet, got second in pole vault. Isaiah Husky in the throws, he finishes third in the shot put. But outside of that, there wasn't a lot of scoring going on. No other girls, I don't think. No girls scored or made it into the finals, and nobody else on the boys' side scored in the meet as well. So, there was a lot of room for growth, and you had a lot of kids who were coming back potentially always. And, that's always my fight with track season. I love track and field. I'm one of the I feel like few people in the world that genuinely enjoy track and field, especially lives maybe in Southeast Missouri. I watch it on television for the people. I just watched all the NCAA finals this past week. So I always want school's best kids out on the track, which can be a challenge at times. I talked with Coach Crowden a week ago, and there's definitely difficulties at times, especially as a kid gets to maybe their senior year, and hey, I'm not going to be a track and field athlete at the next level. Probably it's what's a lot maybe sounds more fun is going to the beach with my friends maybe a couple weeks earlier, graduating and then just going home and not practicing for the state meet and things like that. But you guys, it felt like, and I had the same conversation with him, it felt like there was a lot of momentum that built into this year, and just the kids, you had a lot of kids out, it felt like, and there's a lot of depth on this year's team just coming into it.
One of the things going back to the, seniors graduation and that whole situation, I guess, scenario, I think Coach Sheridan and I did a really good job of trying to hit that head on with our kids and just trying to tell them, usually you graduate the Thursday or Friday before sectionals. Right. There's been a couple years where we did graduation, we let them take pictures, and then we loaded them up in a van or a bus and took them to Festus or wherever we're going to be and put them in a hotel room, just to try to, eliminate some of the issues that could happen.
Yeah.
Well, then you look at this year and it's we graduated the Thursday before districts. So you had
even
almost 2 full weeks before that. And, part of the thing that I do, like I said, building relationships with kids is, I just tell them hey, I'm not going to be upset if you decide that you want to go to the beach, you want to go enjoy and do senior things and not do track. But I need you to make those decisions now and not in May after we've invested times. We put you on a relay that's showing some successful times, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, guys, no, I think I'm going to go do this.
Yeah.
And, I think because we just did a good job communicating with our kids, we didn't have any of that, and we didn't have any kids that really, even at the preseason bowed out and were like, no, I don't think I'm going to do it. The kids that showed up and came out, they stuck it out, and they worked hard and did what they needed to do to, try to put themselves in a position to be state qualifiers and ultimately score points at the state meet.
Yeah. Yeah, and that they ended up doing, you guys had a lot of success throughout the year, great times, things like that. But jumping straight to the end of the year here, the boys finished tied for 4th overall. The girls finished 9th. The thing that stands out, and I was really impressed with leading up to, throughout the postseason, you kids advancing on and then eventually getting to the state meet, is the diversity in skill sets that you guys had. And there was no, it wasn't just like you guys just have a bunch of sprinters and that's all you did. On the girls' side, you got 800-meter runner. You've got a couple of sprint relays. You've got throwers, jumpers. On the boys' side, same thing. Got a flat track, hurdlers, 4x4. You guys excelled across the board this year.
We had talent. There's no doubt. I can't sit here and tell you otherwise. The thing is that I know the kids, but I'm looking off your list as well. One of the things that we started this year, because I felt like it was important for our team, we started a captain's group, right? Mm. And here's what I think is interesting is, I don't know, what are there, probably 18 names on that, 16 or 18 names. I think 14 of those kids are captains, right? Wow. Yeah. Well, everybody's a captain for a different reason, don't get me wrong, but those kids all showed and put forth the effort to be leaders of our team, right? And also had to do extra things. They had to have meetings with me once a week on, issues that I was seeing that obviously I would rather kids correct more than coaches correct. Yeah. They took part in our community service that we did with the community. They did those things on top of being talented athletes on our track team. Right. And that was the thing. But, when you look at that list of kids and events that they were successful in, the first thing to me that you have to really shout out is our coaches. Yeah. We got a great coaching staff over there that is really committed to getting kids better in all of their events. And the other thing that I would say, I think we did a great job coaching staff wise of making sure that we were putting kids in a position to be successful, not just coaching them in the events, but hey, you're at the high jump, but you're not jumping very high, but that's because you jump out. Well, maybe you ought to try long jump. Oh, okay, let's go try long jump. The one that I look at on that list is Jaden Johnson, or we call him Pepe. Pepe is a kid that really, he'd come out for track, but had never really finished, never really committed. Right. And then, he's a high jumper. He's a basketball kid. It's great. Well, he had some success at high jump, and it's like, hey, we need you to try something else. Okay. Well, then he figures out that he can put his foot down on long jump and go far doing that too. Yep. And ended up being all state in both events. Yep. So, that's the kind of thing that, I think our staff does a great job of getting those kids in the best position to be successful. Now sometimes you got to rein that in a little bit. Like Taraji, she swears she can throw the javelin, right? And don't get me wrong, I bet she could, but I don't know that I'm ready for her to test that out right now. Yeah.
Let's stick to the thing you're winning state titles.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, but here's my deal. If that's something that she really wants to try, I'm gonna let her try it at some point. Oh, yeah. But that's one of those things that, like I said, sometimes you got to rein some of that in a little bit as well. But our staff has done a great job of getting kids in the best positions to be successful. Yeah.
And you talk about, coaches and kind of track's an interesting thing where there's not a lot of, teamwork in a lot of people's minds from the outside looking in. You go out there, you're running by yourself, you got your own race, you're trying to throw it this far, jump this high, whatever it might be. But there is a lot of, connection when it comes to overlapping events for kids. And like it's coaching staff especially is probably really important to try to, find a way to get these kids as good as they can be, especially when they are, multi-talented. They have a couple of different disciplines that they're really, really good at. One kid, Demarion Williams, for example, I mean, he went to state in the high jump and then also was a phenomenal hurdler, part of the 4x4 team. A kid that, I mean, those are just, a lot of it sounds the same for a lot of people. Running is running, but being a hurdler, 400-meter runner, and a high jumper, just all completely different disciplines. Like how does that work in even just like a day-to-day or week-to-week practice for a kid like that? Besides just being, incredibly gifted, it helps out quite a bit.
That helps. It's interesting when you break down our week of practice, like with him. He'll spend more time obviously doing hurdles and high jump than he will training for the 4x4. Right. But, he's on our top 10 list in the 300 hurdles. Yep. Right. So obviously he's getting that 300 hurdle work, that 400 work as well. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it's a task to make sure that he's touching base on all the events with as many specific groups that he's doing. That got hard at times, and sometimes we could kind of feel like, I always go back to at football, Coach Gibbs, we have a curriculum, and we got to check off what we've done that week. And it's like I can always tell, hey, if we didn't run one of our, if we didn't run inside zone well, I can go back and look and check off on my curriculum. Well, you know why? Because I didn't practice inside zone that week. Well, it's the same thing with him. If he had a meet where he didn't high jump very well, it's like when we go back and we can evaluate what we did that previous week with him. Well, hey, man, it's kind of hard to high jump high when you didn't high jump that week.
Yeah.
Right? And no fault of him. Sometimes it's weather. Sometimes it's, we got 2 meets that week. Sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that it's a task that I'm always looking to get better at and doing. But, we're blessed to have kids like him that can do that. And it's just, my job as a coach to figure out what's best for him during the week to get him successful. You know, Taraji's in the same boat. She's 100. She's a long jump. She runs relays. You got to practice those relays with those kids. I was a little bit blessed in that regards, girl relays wise, that 2 of my 4 were 4-year seniors for me. I mean, they qualified every year. So I didn't really they needed to practice handoffs. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, hey, you 2 can go out and do it. And, Aaliyah was always the girl that ran into Taraji. So it's like, okay, even if we didn't get a handoff this week with Taraji because she was doing something else, I still had confidence that we were going to get it done because they'd been doing it for however many years. Yep. Aaliyah had been the 3rd leg on our 4x1 for 4 years. Okay, well, she knows what she's doing, guys. And that was my thing. I kind of had to learn as a coach, like, hey, it's okay that we go and do something else today because we'll get a handoff at the meet and they'll go out there and they'll do okay. It'll be fine. Yeah,
let's talk about the kids at the top of the ticket this year. You have 2 state champions, a boy and a girl. I mean, one of them you can start with, Kent Sheridan. Obviously, like you said, something you might not work with a lot on the pole vault, but a kid that, there's a lot on him, right? I mean, he comes in, he's a coach's kid, so there's always that. But then also, he shows up year 1 immediately, one of the best in the state.
Yep.
Gets to the state final freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. But I assume, I'll never know, but I assume if you're that good at something that there might have been even frustration built in for him where it's like, I'm so close to getting over this hill, having this senior year finally where he does get over it. I'm sure that was like an unbelievable moment for everybody involved.
Yeah, for sure. He talked about this in an interview with Mo Milesplit or whoever it was, that I think he said he took 16 attempts at 16 feet before he finally got over it between his junior year and his senior year. That's a lot of attempts over a bar, and it would have been very easy for him to get frustrated and say, hey, you know what? I'm still one of the best at 15.9 or 15.11 or whatever it is, but his determination to still show up at practice, do the things that he needed to do, figure out what pole he needed to be on to be able to get over that, is one of the things that I really appreciate as a coach, that he still had the determination. Hey, I'm trying to get over this bar, and not only did he clear that bar, he cleared another bar. I think it was at the SEMO conference meet.
Yep.
He got over another bar. So it's really cool to see that, and obviously it led to a state championship for us, for him, in that event, which is kind of the ultimate deal. But I kind of like the grind. I like the grind of, hey, where did we start at? Where did we finish? Did we get better? Those type of things. And he definitely took the grind from track season and really fed into it, and ultimately jumped well when he needed to jump well. He's one of the ones that the state meet and the chaos that ensued with that. There was a lot of changes for him.
Yeah, pole vault was really all over the place.
Whew, man. It was one of those things that it would have been very easy for, obviously Coach Sheridan, who's the head boys coach, but also Kent's dad, to get kind of balled up in that and, let emotions run high and all that stuff. And, one of the things that, him and I had a conversation about that morning, and we had a conversation when all the stuff was, the Class 4 boys got moved and all that stuff, is, hey, our kids are going to feed off our energy. If it's positive, for the most part, they're going to show up and they're going to be okay. If we're going to look at it negative and we're going to find excuses on all this stuff, the kids are going to do the same thing. And I felt like he and I really did a good job of just being positive with kids, and especially Kent with all of that. I remember walking by him, and he had that he had that anger on his face, like, man, like this is this is wrong. And I was like, you know what? Hey, man, I gave him a high five. I was like, hey, just go win the dang thing, which ultimately he did, and that's really what the goal was. Yeah, we'd like for him to go 16-4, 16-6 in the state meet. You know what? It says you're state champion, and nobody's going to take that away from you.
Exactly.
So that was the goal for him.
And then finally, your other state champion is probably somebody you worked with a lot more, Taraji Riley, only a sophomore, winning a state title. I mean, PR this year, 1168, which is, I think, the first girl ever at Cape Central to go under 12, and led the entire state with that number across all classes throughout the season. So, I mean, just a phenomenal athlete. Somebody mentioned she also went to the state final in the long jump. She got 4th there. I looked it up as well. I think in Class 4 this year, she was number 2 overall. She had like 19.8, I think it was.
Something like that, yeah.
Something insane. So, I mean, just having, once again, somebody else, I mean, state title, state champion, freak athlete, can do a little bit of everything, but still only a sophomore.
Only a sophomore, and sometimes I have to remember that. She's special, and, I can't sit up here and tell you that, she did that because, I do this in practice or I do this in practice. She does that because she's a special athlete, but, she's one of those ones that is a captain of our team, and her role as a captain for me was one of those things that I had to get her to try to take that next step as being a leader, right? Because when you can put numbers on the track like that, you're a leader, okay? You can lead in 2 different ways, and my goal was to try to get her to lead in a more positive way, which I think she did. And that's one of those things that, doing that also helped our 4x1 team get successful. It's one of those things that, that group, the group that set the school record at the state meet had only run, I think, I don't know, what do we run, 13 meets? Like, they ran that 3 times together. Wow. Like the very first, no, it wasn't even the very first meet. It was like Dexter and then sectionals and state was the only time that group ran together.
Right.
But being positive with that group and just saying, hey, do we make a change here? Do we replace, people? What do we need to do here? And, being able to lean on her and just say, hey, coach, I think we ought to do this, or hey, coach, I like this. Okay, great. Let's roll with it. Right. But you also got to be leader enough. If it goes wrong, we got to take ownership. I got to do it as a coach, but you guys need to take ownership on the team aspect of it so that you head off some of the issues that we would have with that. And she did a really good job with that.
Yeah.
I talked to Crowden about this a couple times, different coaches in the area. I think it's pretty cool the 2 fastest kids in the state are 8 miles apart.
Yeah.
I do. I think that's pretty cool in the 100.
Yeah, no, it's very, very cool. And that's something I talked about with him. I mean, it's nice. I mean, you like sending your kids around, all St. Louis, wherever it might be, to get competition there as well. But, I mean, Southeast Missouri right now has been unbelievable when it comes to track and field. Just like this season alone, you guys have a lot of success that we're talking about. Jackson had a great season, especially on the boys' side. They had some girls that were really competitive. Notre Dame, their girls finished, I think, 3rd as a team. Their boys had a lot of success. Even on the girls' side, New Madrid, they won a state title. They have a couple of unbelievable runners over there. Like, you can just, point a direction, about 30 minutes anyway around here, and you find really, really good competition.
And that's great for Southeast Missouri, right? And the thing that I would say, that I learned as a track coach is, it's a community. It's a track community. And so, it's easy for me to have a conversation with Coach Long about what they're doing jumps wise, right? He's a great jumps coach. Hey, he got 3 girls into the state meet in the triple jump. Hey, what are you doing that I'm not doing? Because obviously it's something. Okay. Coach Allen down at New Madrid. Hey, what's your week look like? You got 4 girls that are really solid, and you got a couple other girls that are competitive, that are helping them, obviously win a state title. What are you doing? What's your week look like practice-wise? And the thing that's always great about that is no matter who I want to have a conversation with, they will have a conversation with me. There's no secrets, right? I think we all know, hey, we have great kids, right? It's easy to coach great kids, but it's nice to be able to have that community with coaches and just say, hey, let me run a couple ideas by you. What would you do in this situation? What would you do? I can remember Coach Crowden called me up on the way to state. Hey, even the Thursday before we're getting ready to go compete, we're trying to scheme on things on, what's it going to look like? How you going to, what are you going to try to do here? What are you going to do when you get back to the hotel after a long day? Now, obviously we didn't have to deal with that, but it's all things that him and I talked about when we were on the staff together at Cape that we still talk about, being in different schools now. Like it's a great community of coaches. And Southeast Missouri doesn't really, I don't, there's times that I don't know that we understand how really good we have it with the athletes that we have around here. But I think, going after this season, with the 1, 2, and 3 weekend and the 4 and 5 weekend, I would hope that people understand, like, there's good athletes in Southeast Missouri, and we're going to, when the time to show up, we're going to show up and, I always tell Taraji for sure, like, hey, go put on a show. Right, go put on a show. People want to see you put on a show. Go put on a show, and we did that. All the Southeast Missouri teams. That's awesome. And you talk about earlier, watching the NCAA deals and all that. I actually bought the class 1, 2, and 3 state meet. And I was watching that. Obviously, I couldn't on Saturday because we were at sectionals, but I watched it on Friday. Watching those kids go out there and compete and all that, and it's just cool seeing people that you have competed with all season go out there and perform at the state meet at whatever class they're in.
Mm. Yeah, and it was that way all, up and down the board, like you said, in all classes in this area. Had a really, really, really dominant season. It was really fun to see, especially as a person who just got to go watch a lot of times and not have to feel the stress maybe you did, but it was a lot of fun. And you guys, you have a lot of these kids that have broken in, have made a big name for themselves. One kid, you said your throwing is near and dear to your heart. You guys have a kid in Isaiah Husky who is incredible at what he does, one of the best in the state, but also overcame a ton of adversity. You can also, it's kind of a crossover here, football and the track for you guys. He has a big injury in the middle of football season. I mean, I know that had a brutal blow for the offensive line, but that happened. It happened, I think, leading up to the Jackson game, because somebody told me about it and that he was going to be out, and I was like, well, that sucks a lot. And then my next thought, I was like, well, this kid's like trying to win a state title in the throws this year. Like, what's that even going to look like? And then he gets injured, rehabs, and then comes back mid-season and just finishes near the top of the class.
Yeah, Husky's one of those kids. Yes, it was the Tuesday of the Jackson week is when he when he unfortunately tore his ACL, and I always talk to those kids about, hey, you got to find your positives, and once we got him taken care of, he kind of knew. I joked with him. I said, hey, my only positive in this whole situation is that you did it on Tuesday, so you gave me at least a day to practice with somebody else, to go into that week to go prepare to play them. But I think for Husky, a big thing for him was, and he said this early, his goal was that he wanted to throw his senior year.
Right.
And I think him being able to set that goal obviously gave him the motivation when it was time to do his therapy, time to do those things, that it set him up for the ability to be able to come back and throw. And so it was just, he got cleared. I can't remember. I want to say it was maybe Wednesday of the week before the Cape Invitational. And we had talked about taking him to a meet, just to try to get one under his belt. And, I said, hey, I think it would actually be kind of cool. You come back at your home's meet, your senior day meet, go out there, he had high expectations that he thought, hey, I'm going to go win it. And I said, hey, my deal is I just want you to go get a throw in.
Right.
Whether you're, whatever we need to do here, let's just get you a throw in. Well, what's he do? He goes out there and throws well, obviously puts a good mark in the state rankings.
Yeah.
And, obviously went out and did some things after that, helped obviously put him in a position to finish all state. But, it was one of those things that, as a football coach, I'm hurt that one of my senior offensive linemen goes down, right? And immediately also as a track coach, it's like, man, he signed a scholarship to throw at SEMO.
Mm-hmm.
What's that do for him? Or what's that look like for him going forward and all those things? Like all those things are playing in your mind, and then you've also got to get your backup ready to go play Jackson, and then what's that all look like? And it was a whirlwind for about 12 hours or so, but we got into. I built a good enough relationship with that kid, that we can go joke and have a good time about everything, and that we can talk about that now with where we're at. And I can't imagine a better story to be written for him, overcoming everything that he's had to finish third, and the cool thing, he won't think this is cool, but I thought it was really neat at the state meet. You went away from the prelims and finals because everything went on Saturday, so it was just 4 straight throws. So he was seated third, so he got to throw third, and going into the finals, he on his 4th throw, he threw the leading throw. Right?
Yeah.
So obviously, we do the clap. He loves getting that clap going, so we clap for him. It's great. He throws his big throw. He's excited. He's pumped up, right? Well, he's real good about like the throwing community. Hey, so the next guy's up. He's leading the clap for that kid, right? Yeah. Well, then that kid throws a mark that's 2 or 4 centimeters further than him, right? So he moved to second. Then the kid from I think it was Hannibal. The kid from Hannibal comes up and throws a bomb of a
monster
throw.
Kid.
Yeah, he was a big kid in general, but he throws a bomb and Husky goes right back to third. And I kind of looked at him, and it was one of those things that he was still excited to be third, right? Yeah. Because that's what a competition like that should be, right? Hey, you're going to get the elite throwers that are going to throw well at the end, and like I said, like I tell Taraji, they put on a show, and that's what you want. That's what you want.
Yeah, they did. They definitely showed out. Like you said, kids up and down the roster put up big numbers everywhere. I mean, a lot of kids on the podium. We mentioned, Demarion Williams. He gets 4th in 100-meter hurdles. Elijah Cheek, also great progression this season.
Yeah, man.
That came out of nowhere for me. Like, it was a name I saw, like 52 seconds early in the season, things like that. I was like, okay, that's a really good time here for another young kid. And then he's hitting. I wrote down like 48, 48.6 at sectionals. And then finally 49-1 at the state championship meet. I mean, I see that up and down the roster. Like, there's just kids all season long. They starts out just dropping time throughout the year. You guys had a really, really good finish by the end of it. A lot of kids peaking at the right time.
Yeah, and that was kind of our goal as a staff. Like, obviously, you don't want them to peak at conference and then go to districts and not be able to, replicate times that they'd been doing. It's still, to me, that's a testament of our coaching staff and, putting in the work with them, knowing that, I listened to Crowden's deal, when he said he was talking to Memphis about, Memphis Engage about, hey, I'm going to do exactly what I need to do to get you where you need to go and nothing more. Yeah. Okay. That's kind of the things that we did with those guys. And Cheek is one of the ones that, I could really see the progression. I'll be honest with you, I think his body changed a little bit, right? Yeah. He dropped a little bit of that, baby weight, whatever you want to call it, right? And, put on some really good muscle in the weight room and did things like that. And then obviously between that and the training that he was doing helped drop those times, going, into the district tournament and all that good stuff. And, yeah, for sure. He was one of those ones that it was a pleasant surprise for sure, but not really I wasn't shocked that right. happened, but it's a pleasant surprise that he did below that 50 second mark, and then obviously went 48.5. Like, okay, now we're running some times that's a state level time right there. That's just not a qualifier. That'll get you on the podium somewhere, and it did. Got him 6th, I believe, and that was really good for us as a team. Obviously, helped us score enough points to finish where we finished. But that's a sophomore again.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another kid that we're going to get for another couple years and be able to do some things and look for him to another captain, another leader of our team to be able to take the next step. What's the next step for him is obviously we want to say it's drop time, but pull some of those other kids along that we got to. We got some of those kids to come along, but. That 4x4 team had a senior on there, so we got to find a kid that's going to replace them. But that whole team is 3 sophomores and a senior.
Yep.
So we got some kids coming back that can help us, but they need to take the next step leadership wise and be able to step up and pull somebody along and get somebody else ready to go to help that team. Be ready to go when it's time to run district sectional state next year.
Yeah, and that was going to be something I talked about with you too here. The future still looks incredibly bright with this track team. You mentioned that 4x4 team, Cheek, Carter, Williams, all coming back. I mean, a kid we didn't mention, Jamie Adams in the throws, had a monster year. He's only a freshman. I think is Jaden Johnson only a junior? He's only a junior.
Yep.
Boys on the girls, same way. You know, we haven't talked about someone like Scarlett Whitvet.
Yep.
Caden Kern, only freshman, came out immediately, some of the best in the area in the high jump and jumps, and also in the sprints here and the relays for you guys. Not to mention, you know, state champ Taraji Riley, only a sophomore.
Yep.
So just like the things, I mean, this team has a insane still room for growth going forward. A lot of these kids, you know, aren't even upperclassmen yet.
Nope. You know, Layla's another one. She's only a junior.
Oh, she's only a junior.
Yeah, she's only a junior, so we get another year with her. You know, she's a 3-time state qualifier right now. You know, she's had I was really pleased with her. You know, she got 6th out of the, you know, when they went to Saturday and they split it, you know, there was no prelims and finals. So she threw in the first flight, threw well enough in the first flight to finish 6th. So that was, you know, I'm really proud of that one. I'm proud of all of our kids, but that was special because, you know, last year, you know, she qualified as a sophomore in Class 5, and then she had the only thing I can call it is a freak accident. She was doing community service, and I don't even know the right way to say it, but she cut her leg open on like a box spring, but had to get like 6 stitches right above her ankle. Well, anybody that knows anything about throwing, that's not conducive to really throwing well. And she gave it her all. She gave it everything she had, but, you know, that one, and then you know, our freshman year we had a mishap. We didn't get her disc weighed in. That's on me. They were in my van. I just didn't get them put in there. So she went out and competed, but she threw discs that weren't hers, right? So she's had kind of a crazy first 2 years, and then to just settle in and throw, and then, you know, obviously finish well enough to be all state, you know, is really good for her. And, you know, she's another one. That's another team captain for us that will come back, that will, you know, we'll look forward to taking the next step as a senior. You know, she's a volleyball player for us. She's a multi-sport athlete that really, you know, really does well in both. And, you know, she picked up the jab for the first time. She didn't even start throwing the jab early. She picked it up like middle of the season, and, you know, she threw like 30 meters, 30 meters, 30 meters, and all of a sudden she figured out how to throw and threw that 36, and then, you know, obviously kept progressing. You know, I don't know if she ever got back to 36, but she got close and, you know, kept throwing those throws. It's like, okay. So she found her another event. She's another one that I need to, whether it's shot put or, you know, we got to find her another event or two to go be competitive in. But, you know, you're right. There's a bunch of underclassmen on that list. You know, Jamie's an interesting story. You know what I mean? I don't know where he ranks as a freshman, but it's high up there, you know, at the national level. It's high. I mean, he threw 16 meters at the district meet. Like, that is crazy to me. So it's interesting, you know, and he's one, you know, he started, we talked about this today, actually. He started 11 games for me as a freshman on the offensive line, football-wise, you know. So obviously he's a talent that, you know, that we've been able to help us bring him along. And, you know, obviously there's some growing pains when you deal with freshmen that are playing offensive line in Class 5. But, you know, Jamie's one of those kids that, for the most part, nothing bothers him. You know, he just kind of shows up and goes to work. And he did the same thing in track. Like, you know, when he walked in, you know, he threw the disc. I don't know, that first meet, he threw it 40-something meters, 42 meters or something like that. What's it say there?
Notre Dame threw 40.6 on discus,
41 meters on that. You know, I mean, okay, and he just continued to get better, and that's Jamie. He's just going to show up and he's going to work, but, I mean, you know, he's a freshman. Yeah. You know, we got another freshman that disc-wise has been another, you know, 130, 135 feet. It just, you know, when you got Husky that threw 175 and Jamie that's in the 150s, 135 just doesn't cut it. But, you know, we got another freshman that will that we look forward to getting out and you know, taking over for Husky and stepping into Husky's role and being able to help us next year as well.
Yeah, and then you do on the opposite end, you do lose some guys, some girls that were obviously probably very, very important to the team, not just points wise, but like you talk about being captains or you know, being there pulling kids along. Like on that 4x4 team, Aiden Dockery, you just felt it was a kid that just did everything, it felt like, for you guys. Every relay he was in there. Same thing, like Torrance Murray, another one. That goes into, and Breon Clemens, obviously a big one. You guys, I talked about the depth earlier. I mentioned it. You guys had, and you talked about having great throwers that can't get up there because you got these kids that are out of this world. Like, you guys have sprinters that are running 11 low that, aren't really getting too many individual meets even this season.
Yep. Brown's one of those kids that, was a 4-year kid for me. I can't remember. I guess maybe it was his sophomore year. I did jumps that year, so I only coached him specifically 3 out of 4.
Yeah.
But it was another one of those that, for the most part, just showed up and worked, and he kind of reaped the benefit of maturing. His body changing a little bit, and then we just fine tuned a couple things with his finish, his middle of his race, and his finish. Yeah. And those times just started to drop. You know what I mean? And obviously, he had the talent to run that fast. I see a couple little things here and there, but to go 10.79 and set our school record, I mean that's fast. Now, is it unbelievable? Is it Jackson fast? No, but it's fast.
But I mean, hey, in that meet he ran 10.79. I mean, it takes fast people to make fast people.
Absolutely.
So I tell a lot of times, a lot of these races, you see kids, it's like, they got first, but why'd they run like an 11.2 here? It's like. Yep. They didn't have to run 10.8 in this meet. And that was the case in that one. I think Brown came in like 3rd place in that meet, which is crazy. 10.79. But why he's there, he's behind Blaine and Bear Reagan.
Absolutely.
And they both are running, 10.5 and 10.3 or whatever it might have been at that meet. Yep. But it was just it kind of goes back to that. There's just so much competition to push your kids to outside of just your school.
Yeah. And it was heartbreaking for me. Brown pulled up in the 100 at sectionals. Pulled his hamstring at sectionals, and I'm not going to go into where he was at, but he was competitive to be a state qualifier, at 80 meters when he pulled up, and the change from obviously he was on our 4x2 team that was literally the next event. That group went out and they PR'd, they ran a season's best time. They just they just got beat, and that was the thing that I tried to talk to them about, hey, guys, we can't be mad when we run a PR time and teams just run faster than us. It'd be different if we dropped the baton, if we, if our handoffs were just terrible and we didn't run fast, but we ran fast. We just got beat. If Brown's on that, are we maybe a little bit competitive? Maybe. But, that was a Tion Carter that stepped up into the 4x2 for him, and he went out and competed, and that's all I asked him to do. 4x1, I think with the 4x2, we didn't have enough time to kind of understand the ramifications of Brown being hurt because it was the next event. Hey, we got to go. 4x1, we had a little bit of time. Emotions ran a little bit high. Getting into that one, that group didn't make it out either. That was 3 seniors. That was Aiden Dockery, Brown, and Torrance, along with the freshman Marshawn that was on that group. But those seniors, they gave me everything that they could do. They did everything that I asked them to do. They did all the workouts, all the block starts, all the good stuff that I felt like they needed to do. And all 3 of those kids now are on our top 10 list, which I think is really cool. It's just one of those things that kind of shows the depth that we have with the kids that we've got, but they also will show up and do the work too.
Yeah. Now, you guys completely rewrote the record books this season. Up and down, boys, girls, doesn't matter the event, distance, whatever it might be. Just scrolling. Like you said, Breon is now number 1 on here in 100 meters. Torrance Murray put himself in the top 10. Marshawn Pierce put himself in the top 10. And obviously, I think, Breon, Marshawn both in there in the 200. Elijah Cheek immediately puts himself number 2 in the 400. Tayon Carter's in there now, number 5. That's another underclassman. You guys just had people, and then, Husky and then Adams really, really excelled there in the throws. 4x1, 4x2 are now at the top of your team all time. An unbelievable season. Something you mentioned or alluded to earlier that, Isaiah Husky is going to be going on to the next level, competing at SEMO, and not everything that's not what, a lot of people should focus on, I think, a little bit too much is where kids are going, things like that. At the youth levels, we talk about a lot with, maybe parents or youth coaches getting a little crazy trying to get their 10-year-old recruited by Alabama, things like that. But I noticed, you guys are going to be sending a lot of kids to compete at the next level off this track team, and probably will continue in the future with some of these kids, their performance that they put up this year. But that's been something that's been really, really cool to see as well. Not as many kids maybe from this area in the past, maybe getting recruited, but everybody kind of pushing each other, getting better. I've seen a lot of your kids and some others that are going to be going up to the next level.
Yeah, it's obviously they're recruiting some kids that got some talent, and so that's the key. But for us, Husky's going to SEMO. Obviously, we just talked about. Aiden and Torrance are both going to run at MAC. Which I think is a good situation for both those kids. They'll get in there. They'll learn the in-college environment. They'll learn, the difference in just now all they have to do is focus on track, which I think will help those kids. Haley Williams is going to Missouri Baptist to run track. That's one of those ones that I'm, as the girls' head coach, obviously I got to see her, progress, and that's just one of those things that for Haley, I'm so proud of the work that she did to put herself in a position to be able to run at the next level and do those things. And she's one that she's a cheerleader, right? So I didn't really get to see her until March, late February, early March. Because she didn't really get to do a lot of the off-season stuff that we did because she was in cheer season. So I think it'll be interesting to see what she gets to do now when all she gets to do is focus on track and those workouts and that nutrition plan and all that stuff. I'm excited to see where she goes and she does that. It's awesome, and just not only Kate, but all the other kids that are going to go. I know Barrett's going to join him at SEMO. Right. Carter Berger down at Scott City is going to throw as well at SEMO. It's just nice to see Southeast Missouri kids getting to that next level. Yeah. And I know for me as a coach, it's just an opportunity for me to go support our kids at some point. Now, It's a little bit tougher when all their meets are on Saturdays and ours are too. But that's my goal. I just want those kids to understand, like, hey, I'm proud of you. You deserve all the accolades that you put yourself in a position to be able to get. And my job is to support you on that next step. Right. Very wise coach that I listened to at a clinic said, you never stop coaching kids, even after they leave you. And so that's kind of the things is now, obviously, when you go, to SEMO and you're listening to Coach Crumpecker, I don't know anything about throwing at that point, right? But my job is to help you understand that I still care about you as a person, right? I care about you as a Cape Central Tiger, and I just want you to be successful and know that I'm going to support you in that journey. So I'm excited for all those kids, any of those kids that we have at the next level. I'm excited to see what they get to do and, where they put themselves at in the next couple of years and what their story looks like for sure. Yeah,
and it just keeps the cycle going. Young kids in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and they see these kids that are doing big things, competing at the state level, winning at the state level. Just keeps that excitement alive in the program, and you
for sure
keep getting these phenomenal athletes. And
for sure, yeah, we do a good job at Cable, vertical teaming, and there's obviously always things that we can do better, but we try to spend some time with the junior high, getting just so that when they show up as freshmen, it's not, hey, it's the first time that they've seen Coach Hemby. Well, that's not good for us, right? So, I'll be honest with you, I need to do a better job at it, but we still do it at points to get in and go meet kids over there and, just try to get them to understand, like, hey, high school track's it's not scary, guys. Show up, get your work in. You're still going to get to compete, whether it's a varsity meet, a JV meet, an open, whatever it is,
and I took a look at a couple of times. There's some, you got some kids coming up.
I do. Yeah,
you might have some kids.
We do. We've got some kids that are coming. And at the end of the day, they've got to show up and they got to work. They they got to do the things that they need to do, weight room, those kind of things with our strength and conditioning program. There's no excuses, guys. If you'll buy into that, when you get to us and our coaching staff, we'll help you get better, but they've got to do the work. But yes, there are some promising 7th and 8th graders that are down in those groups that will that we're looking forward to getting with us and getting up there and doing some things for us.
Yeah, you guys have a bright future. I'm really excited. Like, I told Coach Crowden last week if I get to do anything on this show, it's going to be a propaganda machine for making kids come out for track and field.
Hey,
or these kids that are running like 11 low whenever they're in 8th grade. I'm like, go get faster. Go keep doing this at the high school level. Yeah, I want you to play football too. I want you to play basketball. But if you're doing that at this age, you might do something special maybe out on the track in 2-3 more years. So.
Like you said, seeing the kids, not just in Southeast Missouri, but the kids at the school that they will attend, being successful in events that they run. You know what I mean? I didn't get Brayon out in the 100, but we got another kid that's coming. We had Marshawn as a freshman that ran really well. We've got other kids that are coming. Well, the thing that I think is important and that I think we've been really good with is getting those kids to come back, right? And you don't got a coach, right? But if you're in town for spring break and you didn't go to wherever you thought you needed to go, come to the track and hang out with us for a day, right? And we were blessed to get Jackson Whitvet back. He came anytime that he could.
That's cool.
Now, was Scarlett always happy that he was there? Probably not. But it was neat to have Jack there and be able to have him give back to our kids to see where he's at. He's a great story, man. You got time for that one?
Yeah, sure.
Man, he's a baseball kid. He was a baseball kid freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year. He even played baseball his senior year. But our summer weight training stuff. He worked out with Coach King, our strength and conditioning coach, and he started running some really fast flying 10s, flying 20 times, and it's like. Coach King's a real good friend of mine. I coached Coach King in high school. I don't want to make it sound like I'm that old, but I did. So
I'll cut that.
Yeah, we don't need to go to that one. But he called me and was like, "Hey, you might want to start recruiting this kid to run track." And so when I started approaching Jack about it, he had some baseball offers. He's like, I just don't know. And it's like, hey man, just give it a try for a little bit. And it's funny how it all works out. He had some JUCO offers to play baseball, and that first meet at Notre Dame, he goes 10.99. Okay, well, I mean, you're sub 11, you're fast at that time. And then that next week, he goes to Festus and goes 10.85. It's like, oh, okay. Well, then all of a sudden SEMO's interested, right? And they really like the idea of a kid that is raw. I mean, he's never done track, right? But he obviously showed some flashes of being fast and doing some things. And, he ended up being a state qualifier in the javelin as well. And so, I know he threw that at SEMO some this year coming off an injury. So, I mean, that's an exciting story for us, but, just kind of shows for me, when we go talk to our kids, like, hey, be open to things because you never know how it's gonna turn out. And track's one of those ones, like I said, it's not conditioning for your sport anymore, right? Like, we have a track record of sending kids to the next level in track and field, right? And some of those kids didn't start out their freshman, sophomore, or even their junior year running track, but they kind of get in, they see, and then they also see that there's a future in it. And the nice thing about track is, you may be a 100 kid, but somebody's going to recruit you to run the 400 hurdles. Okay, well, you may not think, man, that's really what I want to do, but it's one of those things that if you get in and you actually try it, okay, you're successful, And I think with Whitvet, I think he kind of knew he could run the 400, but we never really had him do it. He was a 100, 200 guy, ran a relay, and then obviously with his baseball background, we put the jab in his hand a little bit. But now at SEMO, he's running the 400, he's running the 200, doing those things. So it's just one of those things, like, you just never know what your story is going to write for you. But give everything you got a shot, and then let that story kind of write itself. And I mean, he's a great story, and I love having him come back and be around our kids because I can tell that story to anybody that's around. Like, hey, you guys know he was a baseball player 3 years ago, right?
Exactly. Now
he's running track at SEMO and getting some of his schooling paid for and that kind of stuff. And that's a great story to be able to tell a freshman that's, well, I don't know, I want to go do whatever. Well, that's great. I love that you have dreams, but understand his dream 3 years ago was to go play baseball, and now he's at SEMO, a Division I program, running, in the OVC deal, scoring points in the OVC meet, that kind of stuff. That's a big deal for us. That's a big deal for Cape and Southeast Missouri, and it's nice to be able to get those kids back and have them around our kids.
Exactly. I do the same thing. By the way, anybody watching, if you're like a 6'3" center in basketball right now, just go play football.
Absolutely,
go play football for this guy.
Absolutely.
It is great. One thing you mentioned, I guess I'm going to keep touch on here as well, is you talked about Jackson getting in with Coach King and lifting and things like that, and especially even you work with the girls team a lot on the track side, and how important is that, getting in the weight room for kids when it comes to every sport, but track and field, obviously you see the results, boy and girl, because I've talked to a few girls coaches on here, different sports, volleyball, basketball, and that's where they say they when things just start increasing exponentially for their athletes, like the kids just start getting so much better the second they're like, oh, hey, it's not going to make me too bulky, or going to make me slower, or whatever it might be. It's like this, if you get in and you're learning from somebody that knows what they're doing, this is going to take you places.
Absolutely. And we're blessed with the guy that we have. Coach King does a phenomenal job with all of our athletes, not just track, football, all the things that I'm involved with all of our athletes. And he does a great job, to me, of kind of building the relationships with kids, which is what I feel is most important. You know what I mean? And so he can have a tough conversation with the kid, and then can also go love up on a kid that needs that, right? And that's one of the things that I think is special about Coach, is that he takes the time to build a relationship with all the kids and uses that to try to get the kids better. I'm gonna use Taraji for an example. Taraji's one of those ones that, like, freshman year, obviously she was fast, but she hadn't really developed a bunch of that muscle, right? And I started to notice, as she started running some of those faster times, she started to get more muscle mass on her legs. Well, that's just going to help her turn over, right? Exactly. And that's one of those conversations that her and I will have eventually. She's in the weight room now, preparing for softball. But her and I will have that conversation, at some point, like, hey, we need to take the next step in the weight room. I, like we just talked about, I watched the NCAAs, that Hodge girl from Georgia. Yeah. Hey man, she is muscled up. Yeah. Right. Well, that's why it allows her to run fast. I know she's got talent. She's got a bunch of quick twitch muscle fibers and all that good stuff, but part of the reason that allows her to run that fast is that she's strong. And so we all need to take that next step, and we're just, we're blessed at Cape to have Coach King and, have a dedicated strength and conditioning guy that, takes the whole athlete and makes everybody better regardless of what you've got. And, he does a great job of talking with our counselors and making sure if there's a kid that, didn't know if they were going to do that, or, hey, if first semester, they're a track only kid and they're not in the weight room. Hey, coach, I can text them or call them and be like, hey, I've got, Johnny Smith in here. He's not in the weight room, but he really needs to be. Okay. Coach King has a great relationship because he's built that with our counselors, that he can call and, get kids into the weight room that'll help him and all that. He's taken that role and really built on it. And, to me, there's no doubt why a lot of our teams have been successful. It's because of him promoting our kids and getting our kids stronger in the weight room. There's no doubt.
Exactly. Well, Coach, I think I'm about to start wrapping up here. We're going to talk about football. I'm going to bring you back in a couple months, month or two here. Okay. We're going to talk about football. What do you think about that?
I'm in.
Deal.
I'm in.
Well, Coach, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming in, talking a little bit of everything, but talking a lot of track today.
Hey, I really appreciate you having me. I'm blessed to be able to talk about our kids at Cape and continue to talk about track in Southeast Missouri and continue to sell the sport and the area that we have and the athletes that we have down here, because we're blessed, no doubt.
For sure. Well, Coach, thank you for your time. Thank you guys for watching, for listening. As always, find us anywhere you listen. Watch on Facebook, watch on YouTube, all those things. And I'm going to keep rolling throughout the summer. Keep talking to coaches, like I mentioned. I'll bring Coach Hemby back here and maybe talk about some football as we get a little bit closer to that season. I'm sure you're getting fired up for that time.
Oh yeah, we're rolling. We're into the practice time. We're rolling.
Good deal. Well, Coach, thank you for your time. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a good one. We will see you in the next one.
Thank you. Go Tigers.